2 points in this speech. Number one, we're going to talk about the impact of these positive results on casual users, literally millions of people every day around the world. Secondly, we're going to talk about the unique possibility of finding medical uses for these things, which we just couldn't possibly find in the short-term studies we do today. Before that, a lot of rebuttal, and even before that, let me just deal with the POIs we get where they try to tell us different cases that are coming. So first of all, on why use addictive drugs in medicine, as we get from CO. So A, we think they help a lot. Right? We actually think, like, I, for example, literally was injured in the army. I take opioid painkillers and I function because of them. I think it's 100% true that people need these things, but we also think we just don't know, and this will be my second point, how deep these impacts are, because as OO concedes to us, we just haven't tested and we don't know about these things. And then when OO asks if these things are tested for safety, we think it's just literally the same mechanism for any test on human beings, where first you test on animals, you do what you can, but nothing is ever 100% tested for safety before it's tested on humans, because you can't know. We've done all the exact same preemptive tests that we do for every other medical test. We think they need to prove to you that there is absolutely no benefit to this testing, because the mechanism today is that we allow for medical testing that can potentially benefit people in the future, as long as we get some level of consent from people who are doing this experiment. We don't see why this would be any different. In fact, we just think the impacts here are a lot greater for society. Then they try to tell us that our whole case on, well, research on healthy people that we're talking about is unlikely to be the main case. That is literally the motion, that we can do this on healthy people. I just don't understand where they're going with this. But then they try to tell us that there's something immoral about this. And I need you to note this. This is critical for this debate. They try to tell us that it's immoral because, quote, there's a risk calculation here. And that risk calculation leads to the belief that we shouldn't have people addicted to these drugs. No matter how widespread these things are, no matter how much we win this debate by and how every university does it, we will never reach 0.1% of the people who are currently using these drugs anyway. If they want to stop these drugs from being used and being abused dangerously, they need to deal with it in a million other ways. This motion is just not the way. But more importantly than that, we're going to talk to you about why we actually improve life for all of those people. And as far as this claim that, well, maybe we shouldn't be the ones doing this, we just think that A, again, practically, it's outweighed by the fact that we can actually save these people, but B, we think Powell already analyzed and did not get real rebuttal. The fact that there is consent, there are millions of people who consent to take these drugs every day, they're not being forced into it, because unlike every other medical trial, where unless the hospital tells them to, they won't, there are people who consent to this anyway. Obviously, we're not persuading them through any illegal means. And lastly, I just need you to note their concession. They tell us the people today in these trials are probably dealing with terminal illnesses anyway. That is a massive concession, because it accepts everything Kyle says and more when she tells you there are no long-term studies done today, and there are no effective studies done today that can actually tell you what it's going to be like for the population. But now let's get into that more. And let's talk about the impact of these good results for people. But let me just clarify what they already conceded to you and Kyle already analyzed to a degree. I want it to be airtight in this debate. Even if they try to tell you that somehow we still get some results and there are enough people with PTSD, we think it is critical that you note that A, they literally have a different brain structure. Yes, I'm a neuroscientist. I actually get to use that in debate now. It's cool. But people with PTSD have a visibly smaller hippocampus. There's different thalamic activity. We literally just, all the activity and all the areas that are impacted by drugs are already adversely impacted in those same people, which means that even if we get results, they not only do they not reflect, they are misleading towards the rest of the population. But secondly, even if we somehow have enough people finishing these studies, it's important to note what Kyle told you about people dropping out of the study because they don't consent isn't just some people drop out and we have fewer results. The people who drop out of the studies are impacted differently and therefore drop out because they can no longer consent because we have issues. Meaning, we don't just have a bias because of a bad sample, but we actually have an actively misleading sample. Now, what happens when we can actually test these things on everyone? Let's talk about the impact on the users themselves first. So, we think today, users have no idea what's too much or which drugs are more dangerous or what to do in the street. We think obviously this leads to terrible results. They also have no idea what the interactions are with conditions that they might have that wouldn't allow studies today. We also think they don't know how it impacts their age or race or anything like that. Not only do they not know, but no, it is actively misleading, because today if you Google academic papers or you just Google doses of cocaine that people took, you only find studies on terminal cancer patients. Note, the dosage of morphine that is given to a person in a hospital suffering from pain would kill a person who is not suffering from pain. The disease literally means you need more. So when you Google how much to take or how much is taken, you get results that will actively kill you. And that is what happens today because that's the only research available. Right? So we think these people just have have no idea which drugs to take or how much to take, and they get wrong information, and it is deeply, deeply detrimental to them. But what about dealers? We think dealers today have no idea what to add and how to lace these things. We think even those who have some sort of degree in chemistry, even if you want to go with the whole Breaking Bad scenario, and we think there are dealers who aren't actively trying to kill people because these are the people who give them money, right? We don't think they're bad other than selling drugs. We think those people just don't know how to create these drugs, what to do in a lab, because there is no information on this. We think when you actually give them enough information, these drugs aren't laced with the same dangerous substances, and people are much less likely to die of complications that they never consented to and that are terrible for them. We also think it's huge for doctors, because for doctors, we can just get more specific treatment. Note, this is true both short-term for an OD, because we have an understanding of exactly what's going on in your brain when you overdose, which we don't have today. Secondly, long-term, in terms of what it might do to your brain, to your mind, we think we can treat that much better. And thirdly, we just think in terms of rehab, the ability to understand what normal people go through is critical for rehabilitation. All these people, anyone know PI?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There are no beneficiaries for a long-term study on terminally ill people because they die. Only long-term harms on healthy people, which we don't have any inference on whether it is effective or not, because they're not ill.
So again, we don't even think we need to be on ill people. We already win this debate just on perfectly healthy people, just finding out the impact of these drugs in the controlled environment. We win by far. But fine, now let's talk about that. Let's talk about how this impacts medicine. In San Francisco, about 50 years ago, more than 10 people, healthy in their 20s and 30s, showed up at a doctor's office with immediate Parkinson's. No one had ever seen it before. Turns out their meth was cooked ever so slightly wrong. That was the breakthrough that created L-Dopa, the drug that is used today to treat Parkinson's, and gives people years and years of healthy life because someone accidentally messed up in a meth lab and researched what they did. We think if we can actually do that type of controlled research, no, we don't know exactly where these things lead, but anything with a massive impact on human behavior and human feeling is likely to be impactful on medicine. We just don't know exactly where. So now, I can't tell you exactly which diseases. We think it is overwhelmingly likely that as we see more, we are likely to find diseases and areas that can be impacted and helped. Just like Parkinson's, we got lucky once by accident. Let's do it on purpose and stop a million diseases. OG.
Three, two, one. Rebuttals and weighing, and then I'll move on to the harms of illegal drugs that were completely unresponded to from open government, and then I'll move into why a person cannot possibly consent into this research meaningfully. Let's start with rebuttal. The first thing they tell us is that it's better to take the drugs in the experiment than to take them on the black market. I think they agree with this point. The thing that they forget is that once you approve this, a lot more people are going to take these drugs, and they're going to be very helpful for them, for two reasons. First of all, we think that it's particularly difficult to get drugs on the black market. One, because of many crackdowns. The government is actively cracking on electric drugs. It's illegal. So people that sell drugs go to jail, and therefore people are afraid to participate in this, therefore it's very difficult. Secondly, it's very difficult to find a dealer, therefore. Like, I have no, my personal clue how to find a dealer. I think it's really difficult. Thirdly, a lot of people are just scared to even go to the illegal market and to the black market, but they're not scared to go to a government-sanctioned place. So we think that in a lot of instances, a lot of people that are just too scared to even look for them are now going to be able to go to those places. So those people who wouldn't take drugs in the comparative, and now will take the drugs, which is very harmful for them. Second of all, this gives a government stamp that these drugs are okay to test on you. They're okay to take under supervision. So people will think they're okay once the government approves this. This is a huge signaling method that actually confirms to people that it's good for them, that they can, and therefore they're likely to fall into the curiosity. So we think that even though you're going to get marginally better drugs instead of going to the black market, most people are still not going to be able to take those researchers. There are not enough researchers, rather, and therefore a lot more people will take those drugs. So we think that their benefits are marginal. You're going to get marginally better drugs. The drugs still have a very base level of harm that we will analyze, whereas you're completely ruining the life of more individuals. So on the way here, we win. The second thing I would say, even not to a utilitarian weighing that I give to this case, you're not allowed to instrumentalize certain individuals for the benefits of others. I'm going to give two analogies for this. First of all, the trolley problem. We wouldn't kill a healthy person, take their organs, even if it would save 6 persons that would need their organs. But secondly, the analogy about we wouldn't send an innocent man to jail, even if we would therefore be able to catch 100 murderers. So we can't abuse certain individual for the benefits of society and the benefits of other people. So even if they are able to improve drugs as a whole, they are not allowed to abuse the people that are going through these drugs, and it's going to be very harmful for them in order to benefit society as a whole. Even if we don't win this utilitarianism, we win this principally. The second thing that I want to rebut is that there is not enough research on this because, we only research mentally ill people. First of all, notice, the research, because they themselves admit this, people that are not depressed or don't have cancer, the brain works differently than people that are healthy. Therefore, why does the research on healthy people even help you in the first place? You want these drugs to help people with depression. Testing them on healthy people does not help you realize what it does with people with depression. Secondly, we don't agree that there are not enough people. You know how many people die every day? Millions upon millions of people, and you still need only like a 40 people group to test on. So we think that you still have enough individuals to test, even that are sick to do that. But lastly, etc. But lastly, the case about those people are not consistent enough to take those drugs, but you can monitor them. You can have a doctor give the drug himself to them. If it is a problem, we can solve it. So this is a bit of a very, very weird case. Okay. The last thing I want to note is that they kind of concede the debate to us when they tell us that we wouldn't allow people to concede to drugs which are not tested for safety. Why is this important? Because we know for a fact that illegal drugs are unsafe. We know that cocaine will ruin your life. We know that heroin will ruin your life. When they say we will let the committee test it, they are running away from their burden. Their burden is to force the committee to approve it, even though nowadays the committee would never approve such drugs because of their harms. What are those harms that we talked about and weren't responded to? First of all, the addiction, and the fact that even if you start with a small drug, you deteriorate, which means that you are likely to be consuming this for the rest of your life. Cocaine, even one dose, you're likely to be addicted for the rest of your life. They will say, oh, but we will provide facilities to help people with addiction. Those are inherently unaffected. If you have seen a person that was addicted to cocaine or heroin, they will always tell you, addiction is for life. They have been to rehabilitation centers, and they always fall back into the pattern of drugs. Once you are addicted to drugs, this harms all of your life. Whether it is your relationships that you are now behaving irrationally, people are not going to want to be around you, you're going to push them away because of your addiction. Whether because you're likely to lose your job, which in many instances is going to cause you to deteriorate into a life on the street, and even those slums that we see like in the documentary that we saw in Tel Aviv. In extreme cases, because of the higher doses that you need all the time to feel the same sensation of drugs, you're going to die from it. We think that this is an insane risk, an insane harm, and no benefits that they analyze, no benefits, could possibly match up to this insane risk that they give.
Today you already have drugs like morphine that you have regulation on, and they still have all of the damage that you talk about. What's the difference?
First of all, we again agree to use those drugs only on people that the counterfactual is that they would suffer a lot anyways. Like someone who is going to die from cancer or in so much pain, in the calculus, it's good for them to take morphine, because otherwise it would be worse. For completely healthy people, this is completely BS. No person in their right mind would choose to take this. Let's talk about why people cannot meaningfully consent into this. First of all, because people have a very, very big short-term bias, and I'm going to give the analogy. We all have heard the sentence, to me, this won't happen. I'm not the one that's going to get addicted. I'm not the one that's going to go to slums. That's why many people drive drunk, even though they know that driving drunk is risky, because to them it wouldn't happen, which means that they can't think rationally about the consequence. Secondly, I think people are not aware of the risk, and they say that there will be a committee and we'll give you a time period, but think about how many people sign contracts and read them without actually thinking about it in advance. I think I signed a rental contract without actually reading it. Most people, a lot of people are like this, which means that even if you give them the information, because they are so excited to try the drug, they're not able to meaningfully consent to the contract. That's why we have limitation to contracts. That's why we don't let people consent to everything. There are contracts which we simply never enforce in the legal system because we are aware of this, and we think this is exactly one of those contracts which we never enforce. Lastly, we tell you often the offering of money is very enticing to people that are currently in need. So it's very enticing to get rich quick instead of having to do the hard work and work to get money. But we think that this is inherently damaging for you if you, at the end of the day, fall to a drug addiction. For all of these reasons, it is a horrible harm to people opposed.
Going to begin in 3, 2, 1. So OG tells you we're going to get many people who are going to consent to this freely, and OO tells them that this is not going to be a free consent, this is going to be very forced on them and stuff like that. This is going to be very stupid people over poor people who think only on the short term, and therefore it won't be a free consent. We're going to fix this by telling you that today there is a huge taboo against doing these kinds of researches, and this taboo is going to balance out all of the incentives on the short term, because people know that this is very, very dangerous, and it has a big taboo of people who are in the slums or doing crack and stuff like that. So they don't want to go there in the first place. So there is a balance of on one side taboo, on the other side you have the interest to go in to this. We think that what results from this is a lot of innovation, a lot of new drugs, a lot of things that you could get from these researchers and stuff like that. We're just going to prove that this is going to be free consent. So how do we get more accurate research and a lot more innovation on our side? Because OG only tells you about the problems of today. There are no people to do the research, not enough people, not enough from the whole population and stuff like that. But if we agree with OO that there are going to come a small amount of people who are poor or something like that, you don't get all of the innovation that OG already told you. So how do we get a lot of people to actually go into these kinds of research? So what happens today? A very small population is actually the one that actually goes to be examined, like OG already told you, this is pretty much agreed in this debate. So that means that firstly, they're not using these results in companies in pharma who create medical drugs, since it is too risky and will cost them too much to use these kinds of results, because they are very from a very small amount of people and stuff like that, and they could actually harm the people that they're giving the drugs to. They'll never be able to pass it through the laws and stuff like that. Secondly, in the Ministry of Health, they don't use these researchers since it is very dangerous. And it's not because of the taboo, like OG says, like, but because like it could actually harm normal people to actually use these kinds of drugs, because so nobody will actually use these results to actually do anything in reality. So it means that we have like a stronger mechanism than OG, because it's not like a fluffy taboo of like we're not going to use these drugs. This is actually could actually harm people, therefore destroy like careers of like politicians, or destroy people's lives and stuff like that. What happens tomorrow? Hey, we think that many more universities and researchers are actually going to be able to make these kinds of researchers, because today, like, it's very hard to get the confirmation for this kind of research, because it's very hard to get it through the ethics committee. It's very hard to get the okay from anyone to do these kinds of research. So it means that people people who get the okay for the research are the ones who, like, with a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of influence and stuff like that. So it's a very small amount of researchers. So like in addition to what we got from OG, like a very small amount of people can actually do this kind of research, not only like the small amount of people who they get. So it means that you will actually have millions more researchers tomorrow who actually are able to do this kind of research, because it's not that hard to do this anymore. So we get like all of the benefits that OG talked about, because we get a lot more people who actually do this kind of research. You can actually cross-reference to many kinds of papers who go out in the journals and stuff like that. So we get a lot more innovation on our side. It's not just a little bit more like OG gave you. But B, we think that you get the taboo for this research away. So it means that you get many more people who will actually go into it, because today we have this kind of taboo that like illegal drugs are something that criminals do, illegal drugs are something that people from slums do, it's something that poor people do to pass their time or make their life more meaningful, or something like that. So that means that if all this taboo exists, like maybe like nearly no one is going to go to this kind of research and risks themselves to be like associated with this kind of taboo, or risk themselves or any kind of like anything like that. So it means that the benefit that we get from OG, like, is a little bit more people who go in there, and we're not sure, like, it's a very marginal impact. We're telling you that we're going to get many more people out there. Why? Because all of these researchers will know that, like, the possibility to do these kinds of research exists, and we've already told you that these are many researchers. So it means that there is a very strong interest for all of them to make this kind of research. So they will advocate, like, on social media, they will advocate on TV, they will advocate through, I don't know, PR or newspapers or anything like that to get people in. So when you get this repeated to you again and again and again, and you find this kind of taboo through all of these kind of people, so you get the taboo off and you get the people in.
So the problem is that the taboo goes down once the government approves trials. When the drug dealer tells you, oh, but it's tried on healthy people, there is no reason you should take it, you're much more likely to buy it from him if it's approved by the government.
Okay, so about the point of, we're going to go out of the radar, and we're going to go away from the regulation of the researchers and stuff like that. Look, OO themselves tell you that people don't want to go out the law. They are scared of police people who are going to get them to jail. In general, people don't want to go against the state because they feel bad about it. So if they have such a strong interest not to do this. People are usually risk averse and go after the law. So it means that all of their impacts on this are just like completely none because of the regulation on like that OG already gave. So what does this argument about taboo does in this debate? It answers OO because firstly it tells you like where is the population that you're going to get and how you're going to get this population, and secondly it tells you like that there is a balance of like taboo on the one side and the interest on the other side that makes the choice to go in there free. Please support.
your position. Okay, so I'm going to start and I'm starting 3, 2, 1. Okay. Two rebuttals that are going to mitigate the second government point, and then I'm going to explain, filling the gaps of opening opposition, which did explain to us why we do not approve dangerous drugs in general, but they did not explain to us why we are fine with approving it to very sick people, terminal illness, and all of the stuff. They haven't been so comparative, and we are going to fill in the gaps and prove why it is more specific to the motion, why we approve only to terminal illness and to special diseases that we do not have a good medicine and good solution for. Okay, so my first point would be that second government says to us that there is a taboo on experiments on drugs and only this motion will solve it. So there is still a taboo, okay? Drugs won't be legal after this motion. They're still illegal. Still kids at school are being taught that it's bad, there are rules against it, people don't get exposed to it, and so on and so forth. So I don't really get why taboo will be different. Even on the strong side of your case, people won't want to participate in those experiments, and it won't solve anything, because even if, well, I don't know all the rules about the ethics of experiments. I don't think it will be such a public knowledge that you can experiment on drugs. And second of all, I think that scientists do actually want to experience and have questions about the rules and experiments, really dangerous stuff and unexplored materials. So I don't see why the taboo is even present, and second of all, why this motion will solve it. It's still known it's a bad thing to do drugs. Okay, so my second rebuttal is about the metric in a status quo. Let me remind you that already in the status quo, we use experimental medicine on terminal illness people. Even if you have cancer, they won't use the experimental or not so largely used medicine on you unless you're really out of any other options. Okay, so the same thing applies here in this motion. We don't want to use really dangerous stuff on people unless we have a really good reason to, and we don't have any other option. Okay, so what opposition tells us is that we do not want people to use these drugs because they're dangerous and because and we use them on ill people because they don't have nothing to lose. But it's not the only reason why we use we are allowed to use those drugs on people that are ill. Okay. The first point is that the consent of them is much higher. Why is that? Because they have an actual benefit and really immediate benefit. If I have depression, I have really minimal options how to solve my depression. The medicine in that field have a lot of side effects and they're not so effective, and we don't have any other solution. So if I go into this experiment, I know I will get a really better feeling for those weeks or months that I'm in the experiment, and I actually can influence my own disease that I have emotional connection to. I have an interest to solve it in my own life. So I want to participate in experiments that solving my special disease. The third reason is because they've already taken some form of drugs. People in Israel use cannabis and marijuana for cancer, for ADHD, for mental disorders, and so on and so forth. They're familiar with drugs. They know they can help them. They know that where to buy them, and they have a prescription, and they have some experience with that. So their consent is more rational and more knowledgeable. So the first government talks a lot about consent, that people will have a lot of profit because they will get some high or some stuff, and opening of the position tells us that we have more consent because the general public will just have short-term thing. But no, we have more consent on our side because they have an actual benefit for them and they want to solve this problem. Okay. The second thing I would take about this is that those people that go into the experiment that have a terminal illness are under a really large monitoring from their doctors. So if they have some side effects, if they're developing some addiction, they are under a really tough monitoring, really grandfather had cancer, and he going to this appointment every couple of months to check that he's not addicted to his medicine, because they already taken addictive medicine. All of you mentioned them, that people with painkillers are already addictive, so they're under supervision, but those medicine won't make them more addicted. So they're less chance to get addicted, and they're less chance for any side effects. And we don't get that to the larger public, because we don't have any control of them when they get out of the laboratory. And also on this really big mass of people, we don't have the resources to monitor them all and to know all the side effects they're having. Yes, you are.
Drugs are everywhere. Millions of people consent to take them every day without knowing the consequences, and we hold them legally accountable because they chose of their own free will to use drugs. No opposition team proved that somehow, because it's research, magically we take away the consent that exists for everyone else in every legal system.
No, they don't have. Opening Australia told me that the drugs are really not accessible, okay? They're illegal. You need to go really out of your way to accept them. Also, morphine. When you get to Superfarm, you can't just buy morphine and you can't just buy cannabis. You have to really get out of your way, and they don't have the freedom of that. Okay, another thing is that the governments only tells us what benefit they're giving to us. We take all these risks, we put all these people to risk of addiction, risk of being tempted to a very high-risk environment, only because Acamol is a really good drug. I don't see it. Okay, we need to solve the big problem in medicine, and we solve them by researching the people that have those big problems, like cancer, and like depression, and like ADHD. And this is because it's so effective to test on them, because we need to solve their diseases, not some general public diseases. They have solutions. We have Acamol and like Optalgin for them. We don't need to use heavy drugs. So I'm calling you to really oppose this motion, because only on terminal disease people we need the drugs to solve the problem, because we don't have any other option, and it is efficient and it is worth the risk, because it is even an immediate impact and then a long-term impact, because we will find a solution to those problems. And with the general public, it is just a large exposure, and it is really a negative influence. And this is why drugs are illegal in Israel. And if we do have a big exposure to them, we make them more legal, which is bad for the public.
I will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panel, I need you to ask yourselves two questions on every case in this room. I need you to ask yourself, 1. Is this case actually comparative? Is this case actually explaining to us why on one side something should be illegitimate and on the other it should be legitimate? And 2, especially in any kind of case that shows illegitimacy of picking a choice or something like that, you need to both see whether there is actual, like, no knowledge or something else, like, you know, someone being forced, which no team has shown here, or 2, actual, like, negative impact. And 2, you actually need negative impact too, right? We think that it's generally okay to accept things if they actually help you, even if you don't really know about them, right? Like, if no one is harmed, we don't see really why you shouldn't do that. Now, with this in mind, let's talk about our case and why we think that we are essentially the most comparative team in this debate, and then explain to you why our specific harms and our comparative harms also means that we can answer any kind of legitimacy case in a more, like, full way than, for example, first opposition. Just an example. Okay, so first things first, why we think we're more comparative, especially compared to first opposition, but also most of the cases from government. So essentially, we're the only team that actually explained to you both, 1, what the actual benefits to, like, terminally ill people are. Note, terminally ill doesn't mean just people with cancer that will die next week, but also, for example, people with depression, people with epilepsy, people who can actually, like, currently have a really debilitating condition and may benefit a lot from any kind of, like, psychoactive substances, right? We think that people with epilepsy, for example, sometimes get less epileptic seizures when they get some kind of drug. Healthy people don't have epilepsy and therefore don't get these benefits. And this leads me to 2, we're the only team that also explains to you why all of these benefits don't actually happen for healthy people. Why the only benefits we've ever heard here from governments are just you'll be more happy, you'll have more knowledge of how to take cocaine safely, and you'll have more knowledge on cocaine and its effects on healthy people, which we don't have any impact for why we care about that, right? In the same way I don't care about knowing the effects of morphium on someone who was healthy previously, I don't care about knowing the effects of drugs on people who don't need drugs if we don't see any impact apart from happiness or knowing how cocaine makes you react, we don't really get these impacts. Yeah, now let's talk a bit about why we don't care about healthy people more than just, you know, telling you what government said and then saying, oh look, it's not much. So here's the thing, we don't really care about any of the impacts that were said in this room about healthy people. We think they're all just incredibly minuscule in comparison to the impacts that we get for sick people, for terminally ill people, like curing epilepsy and stuff. So let's just first, okay, so two things about that. First, what we get from government is mostly just telling us, oh, we're going to be more happy, we're going to have more knowledge, we're going to be able to prevent addiction. We think all of these things are already things that we can get in many other ways that don't involve exposure to really harmful chemicals, right? And we also explain to you why these chemicals are kind of harmful, right? They, one, increase the chances of addiction, and two, something that only comes in our case, from our specific team, they also increase the exposure of other people to these drugs because addicted people, especially healthy addicted people, are normally in communities that don't take these drugs, and then therefore there's a larger chance that they will be able to, even if inadvertently, cause people to, like, you know, get increased exposure to these drugs in a much less controlled manner. Okay, now final thing about government. Note that government gives us a really great example of exactly how this looks in Menachem's Parkinson example, right? He tells us, oh, people like took the wrong version of drugs, which we're really not sure why it can't happen with like academic research, which is already really frontier-breaking and stuff like that. And then 10 of them got Parkinson's. And what did we gain from 10 people having Parkinson's for the rest of their lives? A bit more knowledge and perhaps a new potential drug. We think there are enough potential drugs that we can research that don't cause immediate harm to people or Parkinson's to people. Okay, before I finish and talk also about First Government's POI, First Government.
The war on drugs already failed. They have a huge burden to show why they stop drugs. On our side, you have more knowledge, more opportunities for treatment.
Okay, thanks. So here's the thing. Drugs are not all the same, right? The war on drugs, i.e. grass, i.e. like, it's marijuana, how do you say that? I don't know. So the war on drugs on like grass failed, yes. But the war on crack cocaine absolutely succeeded because we see many less people who use this incredibly harmful drug. First, government doesn't tell us doesn't like care enough to actually differentiate between drugs which are a little harmful perhaps, and drugs which are immediately harmful and cause like extreme addiction, right? Okay, so one final thing about why we don't really care about healthy people, or even more than that, why we think that using these drugs is, like unhealthy people is not really good. So, last thing, First Government also answers our POI. We ask them, why do we even use these kinds of addictive drugs, or generally drugs which are really harmful, on people who are healthy, or mostly healthy? And they tell us there are two criterions for possible reasons to use drugs on healthy people. One, if it massively helps them, right? Like giving painkillers to people who, like, I don't know, got their leg amputated or something like that. We think healthy people aren't capable of getting any of these benefits. Or two, if it gives us massive potential gain, which again, government didn't really show us, and also we think they never really compared it to the massive, like, hurt people get. Final thing, let's talk about Second Government. My partner already kind of talked about this. We think that this whole taboo point was never actually like analyzed. We think that doctors just research what's best and don't care much about these kinds of taboos. So we don't really get why doctors are going to in any way like be afraid of using these kinds of drugs, but not be afraid of giving experimental drugs which aren't like addictive and illegal to their patients. We just don't really get any kind of delta, and we don't think there will be any kind of massive societal change in any way. So, to summarize, we're the only team that was actually comparative here. If you're not comparative, your logic cannot stand in both sides of the house, therefore, we are above first opposition, and please oppose this motion.
So I call rationale and then like personal feedback during the lunch break. So first goes to OO, second goes to OG, third goes to CG, fourth goes to CO. So let's start with opening cap. So before that, I think we had two main clashes in this debate. First was about like healthy people, whether they are like those who are tested and later on how it affects the whole society. The second class was about better research and medicine. So what happens in the opening cap? What do we get from OG? So OG first talks about how it affects people that are in the research, yes? And they explain like those who are later on like using this drug as a medicine, they know better how it will affect them. Those who are in the research know better the symptoms, and therefore the consent is better, and it will be regulated more because this is a change from the status quo. Then OG explain how it influences the world, yes? How today research is lacking, why tomorrow testing this on healthy people is better, how we can get impact, and how we can get like a research about the long term. And then they explain how we get more trust in this drug. We also get this point from OG about how we help people, how we need to find new illnesses and new solutions that those drugs can give us, but we think that they don't prove enough the extent of that, like we don't get enough in which cases we can find those new drugs, in which cases we can use them, etc. What do we get from OG? So first we get why this is so harmful. They explain first why this is just uncertain, why this is not safe, why we don't know the risks, and we don't know all of those effects, etc. And then they explain why it's just addictive and harmful, like why it can cause more violence, why it can cause people to lose their jobs, why it's addictive, etc. And then they also talk about consent and about why you have no free choice. We also get from OO, like in the research class, that this is just not going to be effective because you only check if there's a placebo effect or not. So I think that this call is a very close call, but how do we read it eventually? So in the class about the healthy people, those who are tested or also cited later. So first we have this point about consent. So OG says, listen, there is better consent because I know better how this will affect me. OO says, that there is no free choice because I think of the short term. So I think that in this point specifically, I do get from OG that I'm less likely to actually give full consent to that. Because I think that like the fact that I think of the short term, we don't understand why it means that you're so uninformed and so irrational, because it is not comparative to how other people think and whether other people think only for the long term or not. But from OG, I do get that I understand more how this drug is going to affect me, etc. What happens later? So I get from OG that it can help me, it can affect me and help me, and I know why it affects me, how it affects me, but I don't understand why it's so important. They also talk about like legitimization of that, but I don't understand how it happened and why is it good. Okay? Except for like those drugs are fun, I don't understand enough why I need those drugs so much in society. But we do get a lot of analysis and impacting from that, and that explain like why this is harmful, why this is addictive, why this actually can cause more violence. So I think in the impacting, even if people are like don't give full consent to that, I get that in OG's side, this is very, very harmful, and therefore, and I think that that affects them. We get from OG this response, like listen, people take drugs anyway, but I think that there is a good mitigation in OO, saying like the black market is more difficult to get from, it's scary, so even like if some people use cocaine today or heroin today, it's not all of the people, it's not so common. So this is why OO win the clash of like the healthy people. And then in clash of better research and medicine, so OG says, listen, today there are not enough patients to be tested. And on that point, like in numbers, I don't really understand why. Like we don't get enough analysis about why there aren't enough people to be tested. And then OO says, listen, there are enough patients to be tested. I also ask myself why, and they say, yeah, you only need like 40 people for an experiment. So I think that's not true in all cases and also not analyzed fully, but this is something that we get. So I think in quantity, I don't really understand why I need more people to test from OG. And then OG says, yes, but tomorrow you'll get like long-term research because it's hard to test today on people who have PTSD or depression or all those things. It's harder to get confirmation for that. But then OO comes with a POI and say, yes, but why do you need this long-term research? Like there are people who are going to die, they are permanently ill, etc. I think we don't get enough response from OG to that, and we also don't get enough of the extent of how do you help the new healthy people or new illnesses. So in the end, and then like OO says, yes, but it's ineffective because you can only check if it's placebo. So I get this, in this flash, it's very, very close because like I get there are some people that it's harder to test, but I think eventually OOs win this clash too because we don't get like I think we don't get enough enough impacting from OG, but why this is so helpful to research. So this is why OO is above OG. Do you have any questions?
What are the impacts of OO on this specific dish?
Yeah, so I think that like there aren't significant impacts on like how to get a better research, but I think like winning it, and like what I meant is that the contribution that I get from OG is very small, like, because all the mitigations and rebuttal that this is ineffective, so the contribution is small relatively to the harm that O proved in the other class. So if that wasn't clear, thank you. Other questions?
Within the amount of people required to test the medicine, I know it's not exactly an analysis, but you also get the intuition that because these researchers take a lot of time, then we probably have a lot of people participating anyways.
Like, I get that, but I get like a deeper analysis from OG saying why those people can't join research for the long term because they're ill, because they can't go there every week, because they're depressed, because they're going to die in 2 weeks, etc. So I think that this didn't apply enough. So let's add a CG to the debate. So what do we get from CG? Two cases. First, talking about like how tomorrow we're going to have less, like why today many of the people who are tested are like poor people, and tomorrow, like tomorrow we're going to find a bigger variety of people who are going to be tested, saying how only the big institutions who have money, so it is easier for them to get patients to test. But we don't really understand in that case how that changes tomorrow yet. We think that the big institutions still have more money. We think they're still more able to find this. We don't understand how this variety changes under their set of labs. And then they talk about the case that why taboo balances the lack of consent, explaining why anyway you have a taboo for those drugs, and why you have a taboo for those drugs, and therefore like even if it's addictive or you want to take those drugs, you have something that prevents you from taking them, and therefore you do a better rational choice. The big problem with this main CG's case is that we don't understand why this is the tipping point. Yes, we don't understand why there is enough taboo to prevent addiction and prevent too many people taking this drug, but not too much of a taboo to actually prevent patients from coming. And then what CG says is like, yeah, but like doctors are going to advocate it in social media and newspapers and PR. And then I say, okay, so they're actually going to advocate. So this is something that actually increases the damage of OO's case. So I think this is actually going against CG. So, or there is like not enough patients, or there are so many patients and the consent is not good enough. So I think in both of these scenarios that I find I need to be convinced in one of them from CG because I don't understand why this is the exact tipping point. And I think like this is a real burden that CG needs to prove to me. I think in both of those scenarios they lose both opening half-ticks. So why is that so? I think that okay, so I think that first in like the case of the consent, so I get two different analyses from OG and OO to why I have better consent in their side of the house, whether it is because I know how it will affect me better, or from OO because I think only on the short term. I think both of those are better analysis from what we get from than what we get from CG about like the taboo. And again, I think like the other scenario just increases the damage of OOs. So I think this is why CG is below 2 occurring teams. Do you have any questions about that? Yes.
אמרת שהקלאש הזה בסוף לא היה כל כך חשוב, כאילו קלאש ההסכמה בחצי ראשון לפי מה שהבנתי ממה שאמרת קודם. אם היינו מוכיחים מספיק את הקלאש שלנו עם הטיפים פוינט והכל, זה היה חשוב בדיבייט, כי נראה לי שגם אם היינו מוכיחים...
לא, אני לא חושבת שקלאש ההסכמה הוא לא חשוב. I'll answer in English. I don't think that consent clash is not important, but I think that even if OG wins that point, I still get so many damages from OO, and I think this is why they win. So if you want to weigh that, you also need to weigh why consent is more important than like people being addicted and people being violent and people losing their jobs. And I think like you did not do this weighing in order to prove this is something that is so injury. So let's understand. Let's add CO to the deal. So what do we get from CO? 2 main things. First, about why they get better consent. Why do we get from CO there? We understand that ill people are give a more rational consent because they know those drugs better, they know how to use it, they're already using it today. I think this is not enough of psychological analysis for why they give consent, only why like they know to use these drugs. So I don't understand why, I don't fully understand it. And the second reason they gave me is that they benefit from it. I think this is actually actively harming the analysis, because if they are if ill people benefit from this drug, I don't understand why this choice will be rational. It will probably be less rational because they have something to get from it. Then the second case that I get from CO is why this is good that ill people, terminally ill people today will be tested on these drugs. Like why these drugs will be tested on them. I think that there is a strategic problem with CO's case. Because CO proves to me why the status quo is good. And I think that what they prove to me happens in both sides of the house. Both teams agree that terminally ill people need to be tested in those drugs, but governments think that all people need to be tested, not only terminally ill people. So I think that even if CO proves to me that point, it doesn't help them a lot in the debate in winning it, because they don't explain why only them need to be tested in a better way and new way over OO. So let's do all the way. So between CO and OO, so I think again that the ways that CO do talk to me about in why only them need to be tested are not new ways, like they are not new arguments. For example, telling me that there is less chance to get addicted for them because we can monitor them, but we can't monitor everyone. This is something that I get from OO. So, and I can talk about more examples in the personal feedback, but like I think that there were not new points of analysis for that. So this is why CO is below OO. Is that clear? Okay. CO and OG. Great. So I think that what I'm left with from CO is the point about consent. And I think when I like directly compare that, I think that what I get from OG is a better and more and deeper analysis of why I get consent in their side of the house. I think they explain to me not why I only know how to use this drug, but like why comparatively to other medicine that are tested on me, I know how it affects me better, etc. And I think that OG also shows like other contributions to research, even if their extent is not fully analyzed. They show me this better than CO. So this is why OG is above CO. Do you have any questions? Yes.
Was the framing of the explanation about why the status quo is good as like explaining more comparatively stuff and showing it doesn't happen for healthy people, like
I don't think so, because you're trying to prove that it is good, that something is good, but this is something that both sides, like all teams in the debate agree on. Like all teams on the debate agree that terminally ill people need to be tested. So even if you prove that perfectly, you don't solve some of the conflict in the debate. So I think this doesn't contribute to that, even if you try to frame it as something that is very important. Is that clear? Do you want to talk about it later? Or so between CG and CO. So I think it's also a close call. But what do we get eventually? So I think that the most important thing that we're left with is like the consent cases in both sides. And then I think that just there is a deeper analysis from CG there. Why is that so? So CG proves why there is always a taboo that prevents you from doing this irrational decision, that prevents you that actually prevents you from giving this consent irrational. And then CO says, first, this is still illegal, still there is taboo, but this is exactly what CG wants to claim, that there is taboo. And the second rebuttal that we get from CO is that it won't be a knowledge that you are doing those experiments. But we don't really understand why. We think there is a public discussion on that today. Even as the average intelligent voter, there is a public discussion. So we don't understand why it's not common knowledge that it happens. And then we think that this is the taboo that explains to you why I'm less incentivized to use these drugs. It's a better analysis than I just know how to use these drugs and therefore my consent, I give more consent. So this is why I think that CG is above CO. Do you have any questions on that? Okay, so thank you very much. You are also welcome to ask my panelists. They were great.
Thank you.
Thank you.